And now you have the hottest country anywhere in the world. So that's the way it is, and that's the way we like it. And it's only going to get hotter. I promise you that.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jim Sciutto in today for Jake Tapper. Very happy July 4th to you. We begin with our breaking news at the White House. At any moment, President Donald Trump will sign his Megabill into law. It is his first major legislative agenda win of this term, and he will mark the occasion in true Trump July 4th style with a flyover of a B-2 bomber before a fireworks display later this evening. The bill narrowly passed in the House yesterday. Its big ticket items include tax cuts, extending those from 2017, slashes to Medicaid and food stamps, and boosting border security funding. The concerns over Medicaid cuts giving even some Republicans pause. Democrats are already trying to turn those GOP warnings into the crux of their strategy to take back control of Congress in the midterms next November. But at the moment, it is a win, and a big one for Trump and Republicans, given that this is what they pushed for all along, and by this, what seemed ambitious July 4th deadline. CNN's Kristen Holmes is at the White House. So, Kristen, what do we expect to hear from the president at this victory lap bill signing?
Well, Jim, and that's exactly what you're going to hear. It is going to be his victory lap. And I'm not sure what you can see over my shoulder, but you can see the balconies there. That's where President Trump is going to come out and deliver remarks. Now, there was already going to be what they were calling a military picnic. There are families, veterans here. We also know that he's hosting the pilots that actually dropped the bombs onto those Iran nuclear facilities. They'll be here today as well. But now he has turned this into a bill signing. And just to give you an indication of how important this is, not just to President Trump, but to the entire administration. I mean, usually you see lawmakers going home to their districts at this time. We know Speaker Mike Johnson is here. We've seen other lawmakers milling about, but also we've seen almost his entire cabinet is here. I just was looking at Doug Burgum. He's right over my shoulder. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. They are filling this area out, and it goes to show you just how important this legislation is, that they were all involved in what this was really a full court press to try and get this done. This is considered Donald Trump's legacy bill, and as you mentioned, there are still a lot of things that Republicans are going to have to talk to their constituents and voters about, things that voters are very concerned about. But there are also things that President Trump had promised he would deliver on the campaign trail, including these no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, as you said, ramping up the spending to help with deportations, all things that he ran on. So they're here in the audience, and you're going to see a lot of pomp and circumstance. As you said, they have a flyover from those B-2 bombers, the same planes that launched those missiles into the Iran nuclear site. So it's a whole festivity here today. And President Trump was actually going to leave and go to Bedminster early, but now he's going to be staying and watching the fireworks from the South Lawn tonight.
Kristen Holmes at the White House, thanks so much. Let's discuss now with our panel. Alice Keller, if I can begin with you, you're a Republican strategist, of course, and there's a lot in here, as Kristen was saying, that Trump ran on, right? I mean, increased border security, extending the 2017 tax cuts. There are some things he promised aren't in here, for instance, cuts on taxes on Social Security benefits. I just wondered, do you believe this will be a lasting victory, given even Republicans have concerns about the cuts to Medicaid and other benefits?
Yeah, I mean, overall, sometimes these really big bills are hard for Americans to understand. You saw that with the Inflation Reduction Act. You saw that with Build Back Better. I mean, I think there are elements of these really big pieces of legislation that just are difficult for people to follow and totally understand. So that's why it's going to come down to how it impacts them. There are going to be challenges. I think with Medicaid in particular, and some of the SNAP benefits too. I think those are the 2 points that, Republicans are really going to have to explain to their constituencies, and especially those moderate Republicans. You saw some of the fiscal hawks. They were not happy with how much this how much it didn't cut. So those conversations are going to continue. But again, I think it will be incumbent upon Democrats to explain their position to the American people, why they think this is going to be so bad. And that will be kind of the narrative fight that plays out.
No question. So Archie, that was going to be my question to you. Have Democrats done that sufficiently? Or at least do you see the beginnings of a winning message for the midterms?
Absolutely. I think that this package has really crystallized the Democratic path forward. And you look at not only, the debate over tax cuts has always been, doubling down on millionaires and billionaires. That's a given. That's always been a divide between Democrats and Republicans. But if you look at the whole notion of the notion of Democrats versus Republicans, there were some shared concerns about the ideological concerns about this bill, whether it was healthcare, millions of people losing healthcare, whether it was millions of people that were going to be impacted, whether it's the deficits, flashing red signs on deficits, or whether it was the ideological assault on renewable energy. In all of those instances, Democrats expressed concerns, but so did Republicans. And so when you saw all of that turning around, all of these members who spoke so passionately on the Republican side against this, they turned around and voted for the bill.
Yeah, there were some quite vitriolic Republican criticisms of this bill the days prior, and then all of a sudden, yes votes. Arlette Saenz, you've been digging in to some of the lesser-known provisions of this bill. So what's in there that is not in the headlines right now?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a lot of focus on the things that are fulfilling Trump's campaign promises when it comes to extending the tax cuts, no tax on tips and overtime. Other elements that are included in this, they've really tucked away a lot of various provisions, some which people might like, some which others might not. But it includes writing off up to $10,000 in interest in auto loans. Now, not every American is going to qualify for that, but if you're buying an average car, you might be saving a couple $100 a year. That is something that would be a tangible benefit to Americans. But it also ends that Biden EV credit that he had signed into law. That will actually speed up the ending of that. That'll end at the end of September instead of in 2032, 7 years from now. There's other issues. I thought one that was really interesting was the tax break for whaling captains. That is something that they specifically put in there to win over Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. They really tried to sweeten this for her as they were trying to get her into the yes column. There are other things like new fees for space launches and re-entries into back on land for these commercial space companies like SpaceX and Elon Musk. We have heard Elon Musk rail against this bill. Him and President Trump have already been at odds very publicly over it. And so there's a lot of these elements that are included in there, but I think repeatedly what you're going to hear Democrats do is point back to those Medicaid cuts, and then you've already heard the different ways that Republicans are trying to message this. I think it's interesting when you hear swing district people like Mike Lawler and Derek Van Orden in Wisconsin talking about how this will help rural hospitals, that they've added more money for that. And so I think the trick will really be in how they sell this to the American people and whether people buy those arguments.
Well, the way we know Republicans are concerned is they delayed some of the most painful cuts till after the midterms. So they know there's pain coming. I got notice that within perhaps a minute or two, we are going to see President Trump. But before he does, Annalise, and while we wait for that, do deficits matter to Republicans anymore? I mean, the CBO says it's going to add $3 trillion over 10 years. I know the Republicans contest CBO numbers, but in the past, CBO has been pretty decent, at least on the plus minus, right? And I haven't heard anybody who says this is going to reduce debt over time.
Yeah,
Does it matter?
I think what we saw is that Donald Trump matters more. I think Republicans do still care about debt and deficit. You have Ron Johnson, others who seemingly won't stop talking about it. But when it comes down to it, I think they had to make the choice, and it was Donald Trump in the end.
Yeah, it does. I mean, from a Democratic perspective, is that going to be part of the message too?
That is
because
key to
let's
the
be
message.
frank, Democrats added some money to the deficit in the Biden administration.
They certainly did, but he was also dealing with COVID, right? So that will be a core message, and the deficit has a real impact on American families. And I think the difference between the deficit now is there are flashing red signs on what this deficit, like we're in a danger zone.
Yeah.
And that is very
Wall
clear.
Street's concerned too.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no
absolutely.
question. The bond market clearly is concerned.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like it's a matter of not if, but when there are financial consequences to that. And we know the president has been moved by the bond market before. We saw that with his tariffs earlier this year.
Yeah, but I think if we want to have a serious conversation about debt and deficit, we have to be talking about entitlements. I mean, that just kind of goes without saying, and it really is a hard thing to do, and I don't think either party is really comfortable with that conversation. You've been seeing this play out with Medicaid, and Medicaid is still going to grow next year. It's just not going to grow at the rate that it would have otherwise grown. So I think that Republicans are going to continue to try and have those conversations, but if they don't really get serious about some of the entitlement reforms, it's difficult.
Well, listen, when you talk entitlements, Social Security and Medicare, and neither Republicans nor Democrats are going to anger older voters who vote.
But
right? I mean, is that conversation ever going to happen?
Well, I think the challenge is that's what you find in unified control by one party, right? So I think that's the other argument that Democrats are going to make, is that their divided government will help restore checks and balances. And I think the only way you can do have this type of conversation is if it's a bipartisan discussion.
Well, there was a time when you didn't pass every bit of legislation via reconciliation,
Yeah.
when you had to have legislative horse trading to get stuff across the finish line, right? You might have traded some tax cuts for some budget cuts elsewhere to try to, but that, of course, is long past. As we await the president again, we were given a 2-minute warning. Sometimes 2 minutes can extend longer than 2 minutes, but we do expect him any minute now. When you speak to folks inside that building, are they certain this is going to be a positive for them in the midterms?
Well, I think that what they want they find this to be a victory for President Trump, and now they will figure out how to sell this to people in the midterm elections. But certainly Democrats are going to want to use the very words that you had people like Tom Tillis, who eventually was a major no vote on this bill in the Senate, Josh Hawley, who was very critical about the Medicaid cuts. Expect them to be featured in campaign ads going forward. We already know that there are various Democratic ad makers who are starting to prepare ads and will go out over the course of this next month trying to target those swing district members. But for the Trump administration, they really believe that this bill is making good on his campaign promises, and they think that's what people are going to focus on. I mean, we talked about the tax cuts, about no tax on tips and overtime, but there's also a ton of money going to immigration enforcement, and we know that immigration and the border was a top issue for voters in the 2024 election. It still is a top concern, and so they are betting that that will pay off with voters and that they will see those elements that Trump had promised to implement, and that may help Republicans in the midterms.
Speaking of the deficit, of course, some of the most critical criticisms came from Elon Musk as regards this bill, and Elon Musk is now talking again, quite seriously, it seems, about founding a third party. He was tweeting just in the last 24 hours, Independence Day is the perfect time to ask if you want independence from the two-party, some would say uniparty system. He went on to say, our country needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that the people actually have a voice. He's got a lot of money to back that up. Again, as we wait the president, Annalise, I'll ask you first and then Archie second. Who would a third party threaten more? Republicans or Democrats in your view?
That's a good question. Probably Republicans, but I could make an argument for either. I think there are a lot of people on both the right and the left frustrated with their parties, but I'm not sure if Elon Musk is going to be the great convener to unify that group of folks.
He's got a lot of money to at least to fund, because one thing he's talking about is targeting specific swing races, saying, I think he tweeted, perhaps a dozen seats as opposed to a national third party that would contest. Would that worry Democrats perhaps as much as Republicans in some of those swing districts?
I think the strategy is a bit of a wild card, and I think Elon Musk is a wild card. But I do think when you look back at Ross Perot, he really did impact the debate on the deficit. So I think that's where actually Elon Musk's real potential is to impact the debate.
And you might say that Ross Perot turned that election from George H.W. Bush to Clinton, right? I mean,
absolutely.
At least in the national numbers, what he did. Of course, he didn't win himself, but he did impact the race. Again, as we wait the president, just a few minutes past his 2-minute warning, our Kristen Holmes remains at the White House. Kristen, President Trump, how does he view this as he gets to the midterm? President Trump will claim a win, and we're going to see that a lot today. Does he have any concern that, for instance, benefit cuts will impact his party come November next year?
Well, a couple of things to keep in mind here. One, President Trump is not on the ballot, and he's not going to run another term after this. So those kind of concerns, we know that President Trump really cares about one person winning an election, and it is himself. But keep in mind another part of this, which is that when I talk to White House officials and administration officials and Republicans, they tell me that they understand at this point that they are losing the battle in messaging when it comes to this bill. They have been spending all of their time focused on getting this bill passed, and they haven't been spending time trying to spin up support for any of the things that perhaps their voters will like. So what you're going to start to see here in the next couple weeks, months, is going to be a full court press. And it's not going to be just coming from the White House or just coming from specific candidates who are running. It's also going to come from outside Republican groups. And what they're going to be doing is really trying to change the narrative on this bill. Again, they are clearly, when I talk to the White House, they are clearly aware that this bill is not incredibly popular among voters. So you're going to start seeing that kind of press looking at advertisements, social media blitzes, campaigns in various areas, particularly swing districts, or areas where they believe it needs to be really explained in a certain way. We also know that these lawmakers, when they came to the White House, they expressed this concern to the administration. Unclear if they said it to President Trump himself, but to the others that were in the room. How are we going to be messaging this? And that has been a conversation that administration officials have been having directly with lawmakers. For example, one of the conversations was around Medicaid and talking about how each state is still going to be able to allocate those funds. Yes, Medicaid is a federal fund that will go to the state, but one of these talking points that they're going to start pushing forward is that each state will determine where they want those funds to go. So if you're talking about specific hospitals, et cetera. So these are just touch the tip of the iceberg here on what these conversations are going to look like, but you're really going to see a ramp up in how Republicans are messaging this come the next couple of weeks.
Kristen Holmes at the White House, thanks so much. As we continue to wait, the president about to do his victory lap as he signs this mega bill. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
I'm very pleased to announce Live Aid.
It seemed a harebrained scheme. It seemed like this could never happen.
Something went on at Live Aid that's still with us.
Live Aid, when rock and roll took on the world. July 13th on CNN.
Hallelujah. It's a perfect place to disappear.
Your secrets are safe with me.
I heard you to be careful, son. I'm tired of being careful.
Dexter Resurrection, new series streaming soon on the Paramount Plus with Showtime plan.
Here on the internet, you can pretend to be anything.
Like an elderly man's bank.
Or an expert plumber.
Don't trust the unfiltered internet. Angie has 30 years of experience finding the best pros.
Angie, job's done well.
Any idea how much you're actually spending on all these subscriptions?
No.
You should start tracking your spending with Rocket Money. You can cancel subscriptions you don't want directly in the app. Download Rocket Money today.
Doctors recommend Colay stool softener for...
President Trump there on the balcony of the White House attending a military family picnic where he is expected to sign his sweeping domestic policy bill there alongside the First Lady. Let's listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Master Gunnery Sergeant Kevin Benier, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, will now honor America with the singing of our national anthem, followed by a flyover consisting of a B-2 Spirit bomber from Whiteman Air Force Base, escorted by 2 F-35 fighters in honor of all our military personnel who participated in Operation Midnight Hammer and who are currently serving both home and abroad, protecting our nation's freedom.
At the twilight last moon.
So you just saw a B-2 bomber fly over the White House. Of course, the B-2s were involved in those strikes on Iran's nuclear sites just a couple of weeks ago. We are now awaiting a second flyover. As we do, Annalise, that's a deliberate reference, I imagine, to fly one of those B-2s now as a quite visible and audible reminder of those Iran strikes. That's one that this president very much views as a win.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's had a good couple of weeks, between where gas prices are, when Americans are traveling all over the country. They're at a 4-year low. The stock market is doing well. He wants to remind people of his foreign policy wins.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and First Lady Melania Trump.
Well, thank you very much, and that is some sight, especially after what happened just a week ago. When you look at that big, beautiful plane, and the other ones were something. It was an incredible mission, and I think I can say very proudly, and I don't have to quote the polls, that our country is more proud right now than it's been in many, many years. We have pride, we have dignity, we have something that's happened miraculously so fast. You know that our military now is the most sought after job there's ever been, serving in our military. 1 year ago, people didn't want to join our military. They didn't want to join our police, our firefighters. They didn't want to join anything having to do with our country. And now, as you probably know, the enlistment is at an all-time record. We're packed. We're full. And I just think that's so important because that was so sad 1 year ago when I heard those statistics. We had a different president, but nobody wanted to join, and now we're at a record. And I will say that I just left NATO, where we had a tremendous experience. They've agreed to put up over $1 trillion a year. They went from less than 2% to 5%, and nobody thought that was possible. And they told me very strongly, the leaders of a big part of the world, very respected people all, they told me that, 1 year ago your country was dead, and now you have the hottest country anywhere in the world. So that's the way it is, and that's the way we like it. And it's only going to get hotter, I promise you that. After that spectacular display of American power, let me just say that God bless the United States military, and God bless the USA. God bless the USA. And to all Americans, I want to wish you a very happy Independence Day, happy 4th of July. This is going to be something special. This spirit in this country, we haven't seen anything like it in many, many years, in decades. Let me also express our gratitude to our magnificent First Lady. She worked very hard to make this all work. And we have a fireworks display about 9 o'clock tonight. I hope you're all going to be around and watch it. I know our congressmen and our senators who are standing right here, so many of them, they did such a great job. They're going to be here. I guarantee you, they're not leaving. They're not leaving. Thanks as well to the National Park Service, the USO, and countless friends and distinguished guests. We have so many people in the audience that have so much to do with the success of our country. We've, I think, had probably the most successful almost 6 months as a president and the presidency. I think they're saying it was the best 6 months, and I know for a fact they're saying the last 2 weeks there has never been anything like it as far as winning. So as you know, 2 weeks ago, our incredible Air Force pilots conducted one of the most successful military strikes in all of history, Operation Midnight Hammer, and that's exactly what it was. It was a hammer. This evening, we're honored to be joined by 150 airmen and their families from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, home of the B-2 bomber. And we've kept them a little bit on guard. We kept them a little bit, let's be a little bit quiet about it. But if you want to raise your hand very quickly, raise your hand, because you people are just incredible.
President
They don't
Trump at
want
the
to
White
be in
House there
disguise. You know, they
giving
say,
a
"We don't
tribute
have to do
to
that." They're looking at us
airmen
like
and
we're a
women
bunch of babies. We don't
following
have to
a
be in
flyover from
disguise.
B-2 bomber
We
as he
saw all those hands
references
go
2
up.
weeks
Thank you
ago
very
U.S.
much.
strikes
We
on
owe you
Iranian military
everything.
sites. We're going to
Great
continue
job.
to monitor the president's comments there alongside the First Lady. We are also following other breaking news. Officials say some 20 children are unaccounted for at a camp in Texas after heavy rain overnight led to just catastrophic flooding. We're going to check in on that story right after this break.